the important question now. So now we have given you a little background. So let us understand now the whole role, and can we question them? So the important question is, can credit rating companies be held accountable for their rating? And related to this is a question of a difference between the role of auditors and credit rating agencies. Is there a difference in the role? And the other is, which came into complete limelight during the global financial crisis, was, is the model flawed? Is the very background of setting credit rating agencies flawed? You know, this is by itself a comprehensive topic. We can lecture this also on in an hour. To give you very briefly here, to start with the last part first. Auditors, when they put in their signature, are liable. So when you put your signature and you say that I verify that these statements are true and correct to the best of my belief in a company's annual report, you can be held accountable. And a good example of this is the Enron collapse and the Arthur Andersen wiping out. What happened in the case of Enron? Or closer home, in the case of Satyam, PwC were the auditors. In Enron, Arthur Andersen were the auditors. And if we recollect, the entire consulting company went bust Arthur Andersen. And the CEO of Arthur Andersen was questioned, was put in jail for his companies and the fact that they put in their, they were the auditors of Enron. So the basic difference between auditors and CRAs is that if the, if the auditors put in their signature and it is known even later that the statements are not correct, the auditors can be held liable. But no, not really with the CRAs. So what is the role of CRAs? As per its charter, credit rating agencies merely give an opinion of the instrument. And if I put it in 3 words, they give an opinion, take it or leave it. So it's up to the investor. So you know what it means? At your own risk. And if you have seen, let's say, the advertisement for any IPO, very, in let's say a very, very small font size, could be 6 or 7 or 8, absolutely not readable. At least I am not able to read it with or without my glasses also. The rating given by Standard & Poor or a CRISIL is AAA. But remember, it is at your own risk. So which means if something goes wrong, you cannot, and I'll repeat the word, cannot hold the credit rating agencies liable. So this is precisely what happened during the subprime crisis. And that is where comparisons were made with Enron and with other, issues which had happened. They said, if an auditor puts his signature, you're going to hold him liable. But when a CRA like a Standard & Poor and Moodys say, no liable, both of them are charging money. So they should be held accountable. And it took SEC, Standard Securities and Exchange Commission in the US, to change its charter. So we have not changed our charter till now, SEBI. So we can't hold them responsible, but there are small modifications which have been introduced by SEBI, like, if you give a rating to a company, they can ask for, a relook. They can question the rating agency, and they can ask for an upgrade as to why the rating agency is so, why the rating given is a little low. But SEC has revised. It took them some time. And I'll show you a slide wherein SEC fined Moody's and Standard and Poor for the money which investors lost during the financial meltdown. How do we justify the flawed business model? That's why I put all of them together, because they're all related. So I'm sure you understand now the difference between auditors and credit rating agencies. Auditors are liable, CRAs are not. Plain and simple. Can the credit rating companies be held accountable? As of now, no. But SEC has made them partially responsible. Why is it a flawed business model? A flawed business model, because all these were questions which were asked after the global financial crisis. And this flawed business model was again all over the place, all over discussion. And what is this flawed business model? It was realized by analysts and policymakers that the model or the basic background of CRAs is faulty. The fault is you are getting paid by the very corporate or company you are rating. So if State Bank of India comes to CARE and says, please rate our bond, SBI will need to pay CARE for this service. It's a consulting service. Now, absolutely, there could be some kind of a relation, if I use a softer word. Nexus was a word which was used during the global financial crisis, which shows that, the kind of relationship they have is not fair, is not good, needs to be changed. But there can be some collaboration between the two. So what are we trying to say? We're just trying to say SBI could influence CARE. Please remember, these are simple examples I'm giving. Or a Standard and Poor could have influenced Lehman Brothers to give them a good rating for the fact that a good rating would give them good investment. So the flawed business model, if I summarize this, the flawed business model is because you are getting paid by the very company you are rating. So that is why the regulators have decided that, okay, it remains like this, that you are going to get paid by them, but we are going to hold you accountable for the rating you give. So I'm sure even in the Indian scenario, I was reading about 2 years back, if an auditor puts his signature on quarterly statement, so let's say you put your signature first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, and the fourth quarter you say, I resign. This will be questioned. Because if you are okay with 3 quarters, how can suddenly things go so wrong that you don't want to put your signature and be accountable? So this is a slide which I'm talking of, which builds our case about the rethinking of the role. And one rethinking is that we are holding them accountable. So please look at the time period. So 2009, 8, in fact, there were laws which came up after that, to take care of issues like this, wherein they say, such kind of meltdown should never happen. It's a kind of job losses, the kind of suffering the economy had, all these are serious consequences. So what has happened? There was a request to relook what was the role of Standard and Poor, what was the role of Moody's, and SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, has fined Moody's with a $15 million fine over the ratings they gave for the mortgage bonds. Okay? So this is one step forward, I would say, and I do hope that even in India, such kind of accountability comes soon so that the interest of the investors is protected. What happened for Standard & Poor? Now, these regulatory agencies must have gone into the details. Look at the length and depth of the role of the credit rating agencies. And Standard & Poor were fined from rating certain securities. And they also had to pay damages. Okay. So this is a great step forward from no commitment to a fine which was imposed. Okay. Let us take you to a little different aspect, and let me come slowly to the domestic credit rating also. But before I come to the domestic credit rating agencies, let me discuss with you another role of these credit rating agencies. Remember we were talking about the bias of these credit rating agencies towards their home country. Okay. So in this context, it is said that these rating agencies, they are very harsh when it comes to certain other countries, like, the earlier slide when I was mentioning certain European countries, they have downgraded them immediately. But when it comes to their own country, things are very different. Even for India, so I'll come to the Indian scenario here. What happened in the case of India was, and this was sometime in 2016, the rating given by Moody's to India was Baa3. Now, this rating of Baa3 means you're just sitting on the fence, just sitting on the borderline. One notch level you go and you go to junk. So, when we explain these ratings, there's a term which the rating agencies use, junk rate. Junk is you're useless. Your debt levels are high, your economy is in a bad shape. The country needs to improve. So this was like the fence. Now, this was the rating given to India in 2016, and India lobbied a lot. And they lobbied a lot with both Moody's and Standard & Poor to revise the rating. In fact, the representatives of Standard & Poor and Moody's came to India. The finance bloc gave them another presentation. That was the time, Arun Jaitley ji was the finance minister. So they were there. The presentation happened. They listened to the whole story which India said. But at the end of it, they say, no, we are not going to revise your rating. It remains at Baa3. And the reason given, and I've mentioned it in the slides also, is India's banks are a cause of concern. So they said the non-performing assets of the Indian banks, the debt levels of the Indian banks are a cause of concern. However, India lobbied a lot for these ratings. And that was sometime in December 2016. So at the first level, when they lobbied for an upgrade, they failed. But after that, sometime in 2017, they again lobbied and they were able to revise this rating to Baa2. But there was a lot of story which happened before that. So between end of 2016 and end of 2017, or before we reached Baa2, the other part of the story was after downgrading India, they also downgraded China. So the China downgrade was after many years. So after India, they downgraded China from Aa3 to A1. And it is said that this was a first downgrade for China in 28 years. What was the warning to China? The warning to China was your economy is slow and your debts are rising. Okay. And I've just quoted some of the statements given by Moody's. So they said, why is there a downgrade? The downgrade reflects Moody's expectations that China's financial strength will erode somewhere over the coming years, with economy, debt continuing to rise and the growth slow. And in the case of India, the reason they said was our banks are a cause of concern. Now, both India and China lobbied for a higher rating. We'll give you the reason as to why we need a higher rating. But the point remains that it was at that time that both India, China, and a lot of neighboring countries, they said they did not downgrade, a Lehman or an AIG or, the other corporates which were in a difficult scenario during the 2008 crisis. So it was felt that they were very partial towards their home country and very harsh towards other countries. Remember the slide I showed earlier? And it was at that time there was a move which was taking place wherein a lot of these countries in this belt, or more specifically the BRICS country, they started saying, we are not going to get ourselves rated from a Standard & Poor and Moody's. Let's have our own credit ratings. God knows what, but probably this did the trick. Because remember, we start by saying that credit rating is good business. They make a lot of money in this. So they said, okay, if there are so much doubts and aspersions cast on us, that was the time they at least revised India's rating to be AA2. Let me quickly come to why, whether it's India or China or other countries, why do we want a higher rating? Simple logic, and I'm sure each one of you will understand. A higher rating signifies that we are more credit worthy. And in one line, it helps to lower the borrowing costs. I mean, to give you a little approximate idea of the rates, if our rating is Baa3, and if Indian corporates go to the international market and buy, the range for the interest rates would be somewhere between 6 to 9%. I'm just giving you very approximate rates, what I've read. And as soon as we come in the Baa2 category, we can raise loans in the international market somewhere between 2% to 5%. So I'm sure you would appreciate that raising funds in the international market means substantial lowering cost. Okay, substantial lowering of costs and risk payment. Okay, so this was one important reason wherein, whether it's in India or China, we want to ensure that our rating is good. Let us now come to the Indian credit rating. I'll skip through these beginning slides because I have talked a little, and a lot more what is given in your screen is factual. So we have a CRISIL, which was started in 1988, and ICRA, which started in 1991, and CARE, which started in 1993. And to give you a little history, somewhere in 1992, we had a very famous Lloyd finance controversy, wherein a lot of investors lost their money. And that is the time government started thinking very seriously about the role of the credit rating agencies. So even though CRISIL has recently been incorporated, but the whole move got a lot of impetus after this issue of the Lloyd finance controversy. And what you have to remember is, the role of banks is financial intermediation. If the banks are able to fulfill the demand gap between suppliers and borrowers, it's great, but they're not able to do that. So that's why you have NBFCs, chit funds, and you have a lot of these add-on institutions. So it is necessary to make our market more transparent. And that is why they said, how do you help the investors? Everybody is not a large investor. Everybody is not an institutional investor. So how do you help them? You help them with these independent credit rating agencies. And there are a lot others also, which I have shown you here, like, like an Anikra, a Smera, whose name has also been changed now. And then, there are a lot more. But ICRA, CARE, and CRISIL are the three major agencies. I'm not going into the methodology. I'm sure each one of you can look up the online to see what the methodology is. But let me also tell you, they will not disclose their methodology completely. No way. So CRISIL generally uses a CRAML framework. CRAML implying capital adequacy, resource raising ability, asset quality, management evaluation system. E is for earnings, and L is for liability, also denoting asset liability management. So, these are the parameters. So you have a CIBIL score also these days, CIBIL score also. Let me come to the importance of credit rating agencies. Okay? What is the importance? The importance of credit rating agency is, we have again and again said, to increase investor confidence, facilitate decision-making, measure the probability of default, so that, remember what we said, credit risk management, to do a SWOT analysis, and the fact that an instrument is rated, it enjoys good, confidence of the investing public. For a certain period of time, sometime after 2010, about 13, 14, SEBI had made it mandatory for all instruments to be rated. It's no more mandatory now, but the fact remains that all of them still get themselves rated. Now, when I put a question like this, are Indian credit ratings credible? Are Indian credit ratings reliable? I'm only doing a little more in the Indian context. The point is, the answer to this is very subjective. And if I give a very professor kind of an answer, it's 50% yes and 50% no. Because it's not a quantitative exercise, and it cannot be a quantitative exercise. And later on, we are going to tell you that model is not the right solution. But the fact remains, credit rating involves subjective judgment with objective analysis. You know what it means? It's a very loaded word. Objective is your financial statement, other information. So what happens? What does a company do? It gives its entire annual statement for the last 10 years. It gives its management discussion analysis. It gives its growth projection. It gives all the qualitative information. So for pages and pages and pages of information which the company gives to the credit rating agency, what do they get in return? They just get a number which is AAA or A minus or A plus or something like that. So that's what we mean. Subjective judgment with objective analysis. Rating shopping is like, again, something which needs a little more depth explanation. To give you very briefly, suppose it is Gas Authority of India Limited. It wants to offer long-term bonds to the public. It goes to CRISIL. CRISIL gives it an A plus. It goes to CARE. CARE gives it an A minus. And it goes to ICRA. ICRA gives it an AA plus. In this very brief example, CRISIL has given A plus, CARE has given A minus, and ICRA has given AA plus. What will the company do? They will disclose to the public the rating given by ICRA, which is AA plus plus. Now, this is rating shopping. Rating shopping is like the company first went to CARE. CARE gave it A minus, it was not happy. CARE said, no, I deserve better. So they went to CRISIL. CRISIL gave it A+, was still not happy. So it went to ICRA, which gave it a AA+. And it's very happy and it discloses. There are 2 or 3 issues which come. GAIL will only disclose the rating given by ICRA. Is there something wrong in this? No. Is there something legally wrong in this? No. Which means rating shopping is legally allowed. So a corporate, a company can go to 10 rating agencies, get itself rated and only disclose 1. And I hope you know, if it's a long-term bond, let's say ICRA rates, let's say CRISIL and CARE is also rated. And let's say the bond is 5 years. It is mandatory for whosoever's rating becomes public to revise the rating every 6 months. So if you look up some of the newspapers, ICRA will say, we reaffirm the rating of AA+ we have given. We downgrade this rating, we upgrade, which means if it is a 5-year bond, and let's say the rating happens today in 2021, it will be the duty of ICRA, whose rating has been made public, to keep the investors informed for the next 5 years every 6 months, which means twice a year. Okay, so it's not that if it is a long-term bond, you can rate and forget about it. No. So there are 2 concepts I've explained here. Rating shopping is a cause of concern because if one company doesn't give you a good rating, you can go to the other. But please remember, this is more in theory and less in practice. Because remember what we started with, a flawed business model? So companies rarely like to not satisfy their clients. So they will go out of their way. They will go to any length to satisfy GAIL in this case. Okay, so there'll be a lot of meetings between the two. But yes, the fact remains that since rating comes for it's expensive. It's not easy for companies also to approach these 3 institutions like the example I'm giving. It's completely a theoretical example. But yes, rating shopping is a cause of concern. Okay. Then lack of transparency, we are just implying that the methodology by CRAs is not made public. You know what I was referring to when I said go online? They'll just say these are the ratios, etc., etc. So they'll give you 4 or 5 pages, but the exact methodology they use, what model are they using, what qualitative features are they using? No, that is not made public. And then the last part is credibility arises from objectivity of resource allocation. Now the point is, I just gave you an example of this rating shopping. Why is there a difference in rating? And it's a fact. Please remember, rating is qualitative. Rating is judgmental. It's simply, I'll give you a very simple example. If let's say there is one answer script and I ask 10 of you to evaluate it, there'll be minor differences. So if there's question number 1, somebody would have given 5 marks out of 10, somebody would have given 6, somebody would have given 6.5, and so on and so forth. So there's a little qualitative judgment. There's a little perception. So that's what we mean by fuzziness of the data. I mean, the same data can be interpreted by different people in different ways. This is also there in literature which says readiness, reluctance of the company in disclosing information, proper control systems are not in place. A lot of these are more like theoretical, which we pick up from various literature which we see. Credibility of the agencies carrying out the rating. Industry is still young, not very young. This comment is always very subjective, keeping in view the growth of credit rating agencies in the US and other developed countries. Now, with this background, what could be the suggestions to improve the credit rating agencies? What could be the rethinking? What could be the way forward? Now, this is our focus now. So a little more summary of what we have done. First, CRAs need to adopt a professional code of standard. And they have to look at the needs of the client, and they also need to look at the economy. So suppose somebody asks you to evaluate a proposal during the pandemic. I mean, you have to look at the kind of scenario we are in. You have to look at the kind of difficulties which that company is facing. So if there are e-commerce companies, you say, oh, why? They are doing very good. There's a pharmaceutical company, there's an Amazon. Yeah, great, their profits have gone out. But if you look at a lot of other sectors, let's say the hospitality sector, the aviation sector, they all have suffered during the pandemic. So you need to relook. You need to look at the economy. You need to look at those parameters and then say, this is how I evaluate. Then it should try and make a commitment to get the precise rating. One that is forward-looking and free of unsubstantiated bias. So, what it means is that try and remove the subjectivity. Try and remove the biases. So that is again one suggestion. A few more thoughts here. A few more thoughts which could go into the improvement. One, a lot of times it is observed, credit rating agencies adopt a very touch me not attitude. They say, I'm not approachable. How do we define a good faculty? How do we define a good teacher? He has to be approachable to your students. So I'm not saying 24/7, but at least we have to have that empathy. You have to look at the problems of your students. Exactly same for credit rating institution. They need to be accessible and approachable to their clients. They need to engage their clients in a talk. And even before they give rating, if there is some information missing, don't adopt a standoff attitude. I'm not going to ask for information. No. Ask for information. Find out the information. Then, do not, try and be transparent. You need to be transparent. In fact, I can really say that this word is something which is both used and misused. Transparency is a word which is more and more less understood now, because what does transparency mean? For corporate governance also, we say it should be transparent. Now, transparency means going up to A level and not up to B level. But if I give you one or two terms for transparency, do not remain in a black box. And still a simpler way would be, do not remain in your ivory tower. Come down. Go down to the level of the company. Go down to the level of the company you are rating. And this is more true when it's a smaller company. So try and see what their problem is. Try and see from their lens. See, the fact remains, it's completely disruptive technologies we are living in now. So try and look at the issues from their perspectives. Then this is another very relevant point. Do not remain in silos, which means, even in an organization, by silos, what I mean is there is a marketing department, there's a production department, there is an HR department. Similarly in colleges. So you have 10 departments. What do we insist? In fact, what does the new education policy insist? Cross-functional thinking. If there is one suggestion of the new education policy, it talks about, apart from school education, primary education, they talk about cross-functional thinking. And that is what it means. So a person in IT needs to correlate with somebody in management, or somebody in operations, or somebody in some other field. So do not remain in silos. When we work together, we tend to gain a lot. So that is what is an important suggestion here. And in a little more CRA context, work with various asset classes. So I was giving an example of a college, I was giving an example of a faculty. In the context of credit rating agencies, you work with different asset classes. So when you work with different asset classes, you will tend to gain knowledge. Okay. But this is again an important point, and I have emphasized it when we talked about rating for India, at least, if not China. Credit rating agencies have a clear bias, size bias. So if an enterprise is small, if an enterprise is a startup, let's penalize them or be harsh on them. Please don't do that. And then should not be model driven. In fact, I'm sure, and I like to emphasize this point again and again, that the important drawback of the global financial crisis was they relied too much on modeling. The entire focus was on modeling and less on qualitative parameters. And there were various discussions at that point of time, and each one said that whether it's our students or whether it's otherwise, because when I say students, I'm talking about discussions which happened in a lot of B schools also. We teach our students a lot of modeling. No, please teach them qualitative understanding also. So don't be model driven. Model along with qualitative is the right balanced approach. Okay. Okay. The next is what should be the recommendations for credit rating agencies. I mean, some of them are very traditional recommendations, and some of them, are a little more arriving from the discussion we have had. The issuer payer model needs a revamp. It's susceptible to bias. I'm sure during the crisis also you would have heard of a phrase which said rating the raters. What it meant was credit rating agencies, let's have somebody to rate them also. That's a never-ending process. So for the time being, that has not really gone into a discussion and thinking. There must be greater transparency. As I said, transparency, you need to define the parameters. And that is what we are doing now. In rating methodology and process must be made legally liable. Now, this is something which needs to be done. It has happened in the case of SEC in the US. We need to ensure this in India also. And all this is the model-driven part, which we will help you, which will help us in summarizing our role of the credit rating agency. So we are saying more research on qualitative factors. Have a look at the political system. Have a look at the economic system. Have a look at the financial risk factors. Okay. Point is, why do we take these ratings seriously at all? Let's forget about the rating. No, we cannot. Even though they could be guesses, they could be subjective, but they are still a shot in the dark. We still get to know something about a proposal. So at least some parameters have looked at them. The nexus will not happen all the time. Will not happen all the time. Okay. So at no point, whether it's the regulator or whether it's, any other agency, we are not talking about having a methodology, a formulaic methodology. So I'm not saying an A plus B plus C plus D, this should be the methodology. No, we're not even talking about a model, because if it's a model and I just feed in the parameters, I'm not going to get the right result. And before I go to the thank you slide, one line, if I were to summarize our discussion today, or let's say 2 lines. One is credit rating is more an art than a science. It's not an art. It's not a science. And that's what we say. No modeling complete. So model with quality. And the second conclusion is there is no one size fits all. So if you were to think that these were the factors And these are the parameters which helped me understand how to rate a company. And even if they are from the same sector, the same methodology should go for B company. No, no, no. It may happen one of time, yes, but not always. So let's remember that there's a lot of qualitative part, there's a lot of qualitative dimension, and that is what will help the credit rating agencies reach the next milestone, justify the purpose for which they have been set, and to sum it all, help small investors like you and me. Thank you so much for your time and your patience. Have a great day.